Bottles really came about because early prehistoric man had to find some way to carry the most basic thing, water. So that became into crocks and jugs and different types of things, and that slowly evolved into bottles.
Baltimore, Maryland's early settlement provides an opportunity to discover its history through the examination of bottles.
Being on the East Coast, we were settled first, so the oldest stuff is going to be here. I actually have things in my collection that are English, that came over who knows when, but these are English-made bottles. So if you go out west, of course there are things out there that are not nearly as old as us. I've talked to other diggers out there, and a lot of them, if they find something in the 20s and 30s, are very happy. Early bottles were made out of crockery, and it had a printed glazed in label. Then bottles had a big blob top on them, and that is a different closure they had. And then bottles evolved from that to what we know today as the crown top. It's the regular top that you see on every bottle that has a lid on it. And that was invented in Baltimore and became the standard the world over. It's called the loop seal.
The rich history of bottles in Baltimore allows its residents to pursue their interests in antique bottle collecting.
I really just started out collecting. First thing I dug was a Northwestern beer bottle, and it had a date on it of 1907. But as I began to dig bottles and look for bottles, I ended up, sometimes you dig a dump and it'd be a house dump, and that particular family in the 1880s, 1890s liked a certain particular bottle or medicine. So you end up getting 2 or 3 or maybe 5 or 7 of the same medicine.
I started out with cleaner bottles like the Clorox bottles, things of that nature, Clorox bleach and stuff like that, because they were something I found in the woods a lot. Then that branched over to milk bottles. Now it's branched to about anything that's old that was made in Baltimore.
When I was a kid, 12 and 13, maybe 14 years old, I had bottles everywhere, like you see here, I just love it.
Each March, the Baltimore Antique Bottle Club, one of the biggest antique bottle clubs in the country, hosts the largest one-day bottle show in the world. Drawing vendors and visitors from across the country and the world, people convene to buy, sell, trade, and share their enthusiasm for bottles.
The club was started to actually catalog and record some of the antique bottles people had found. People had collected them for years and years. Back in 1969, the club was formed, and it was probably very small, very few members, and over time it's grown. And what we've done is compiled a book with every bottle we can find that is actually made in Baltimore. The show's been around, this will be our 32nd year. It started with maybe a couple hundred people, and it's grown from a small room to a huge gymnasium-sized room. It's the largest one-day bottle show in the world. We have sellers and dealers and collectors from almost every state and a couple different countries.
The people bought these to be thrown at the fire, so a lot of them didn't survive. So it's nice. You get a good coloration and also a good investment.
I'm a painter and an artist, and over time I was always painting on canvas or board. And one day, after digging so many of these strap flask bottles up, I decided this is kind of a nice shape, and maybe I could do a painting on a strap flask. So little by little I've done them, and this one goes a little bit further back in time. Claudia.
Well, this is one of my more recent finds. We found an old hotel dump in the Hudson River Valley. The hotel exists from the 1850s to 1891, and it has thousands of bottles.
It's one that we dug up that's rather large, and it was all intact, blob top, hand blown. My mother will keep it in her family forever.
About 35 years ago, I was on a hillside, kicked out a milk bottle, and
that started it.
I actually started collecting bottles almost 30 years ago. A friend of mine dug bottles, and he got me into it.
My husband went with a stick along the edge of the creek and a bottle fell out. So we started collecting.
I started collecting bottles when I was 12. I was into metal detecting, and literally the water meter man saw me metal detecting and said, "Hey, you should dig up old bottles." And he brought some to me, and I went under my parents' porch first. It's an old Victorian mansard house. We found a bunch of bottles under there, and after that, it's all been downhill.
I was real little, probably about 8 or 9. My grandfather took me digging for bottles in an old dump up in northeast Maryland. We were his cheap labor, the grandkids. He would dig them, we would haul them up the hill for him. So after seeing what he collected, I thought maybe it was kind of neat to do the same thing.
Bottles that were thought of as trash hundreds of years ago are bringing people together and finding new life as art, memories, and stories that can be shared. Using bottles, Baltimore is defining itself as a society dedicated to its own historical preservation.